everyone, it is Shar and welcome back to my channel. I was going to say welcome back to the 100 Baby Challenge. That is not what this is. A couple of weeks ago or a few days ago or something, time is irrelevant, I posted a video, a creative sim video. If you don't know, I'm working on my save file. I really focus on characters and just storylines and make people connected to each other in that save file. So I put a video out for my creative sim for a family that lives in this house. There are two people. I completely forgot their names. The video is called something like They Bought Their Dream House, and this is their dream house. And I have been building this house for a very long time. I have anxiety, so something I struggled with at the beginning of my channel and creating my channel was trying to finish like these massive builds in one day. Otherwise, I felt like I hadn't accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. But then I just realized like that is very anxiety inducing in itself, and often building a house that is this big is really hard to do in one day. It would take up my entire day, and honestly, I just didn't have the time. So I spent a few days over the span of like a week or two building this house, and it is finally done. And one thing you should know is that I really made an effort to make it realistic. And by that, I mean that you will find like mistakes that were purposeful, things that don't fully make sense, space that isn't fully utilized. Not everything is decorated because they just moved in, and realistically it probably cost them the majority of their life savings to move into this house with a little bit of room for furniture. So there are things that they wouldn't have been able to fully decorate, and they will be doing so over time. And I find that when I play The Sims, my Sims collect things, right? They end up having pictures, or they have families, or they just get memories, or just get things throughout their life that they accumulate, and I like to decorate the house with it. With that said, I was very intentional with this family in that neither of the people actually want kids. That's not a desire that they have. They have no interest in having children at all. For them, they are very content to be them, their dog, and their cat, and that is them at like peak form. Not everyone wants kids. That is okay. That's not what happily after means for some people, and for this couple, that is not what their happily ever after looks like. So as I was saying, when I was decorating the interior of this house, I really wanted it to be realistic, because truly this family moved into this home. It is their dream home. This couple, they've been saving for a long time, but they wouldn't be able to afford this house if it had been fully renovated, fully updated, all new appliances, all new everything, because that would just blow it out of their price range. And the reason why they were able to afford it is because this house is outdated to a certain extent in certain areas, and not everything fully makes sense. It's something they would require renovations at some point to touch. With that said, it's not run down in any way, it's just outdated. So that's the look I was going for with the interior. And with that said, we're gonna jump into the bookish portion of this speed build. If you are new to my channel, first of all, welcome. It's so nice to have you here. I hope that you are enjoying the video. But if you are new here, the way I tend to do these speed builds or creative sim videos, or just things where I am not speaking while I'm recording and rather speaking after I'm recording and have already sped up the video, is that I will talk about books or things that are going on in my life. And this time around, I wanted to talk about books. I have been reading an absolute ton this year. I just passed my Goodreads goal, which was to read 75 books this year, according to Goodreads. And when I set that goal, I have read 76 books, but I actually have a read in 2021 bookshelf on my Goodreads, and I have read something like 86 books actually. But the reason why I don't really count 81 books, the reason why I don't really count that is because I started reading again in like late November and December of last year, and I didn't start tracking my reading until June. So all that time was like my best estimate of what I had been reading. I had like a list that I wrote down in my planner, but in my planner, I never wrote down when I read that book. So I'm sure some of those 81 books I read in like December, or I read in late November, but I can't remember if I read it in late December, if I read it in early January. So that's a very long-winded way to say that I'll try not to include the books that are not part of the 76 books that I know I definitely read this year. And instead, I was thinking, let's do the mid-year freakout tag. Like, I see so many people do that. The original tag, according to this article I have pulled up, was created by Read Like Wildfire and Earl Grey Books. That's not ever super clear in like the mid-year freakout book tags. My understanding is that the original video and the original tag has been taken down, and it's just this thing that's long-standing in the booktube community, and people vaguely know where it comes from, but they don't have a super clear idea. But according to this article, those are the two original creators, so full credit to them. And I haven't prepared at all in advance because I'm me, and why would I do that, right? I'm just going to talk to you about some of the things on this list and how I would answer that question. So the first question is, what's the best book you've read so far in 2021? And the easy answer to that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Yes, that is a very overhyped book, but I really saw myself in Evelyn. I am also bisexual, and it was just amazing to read the story. I was reading it when I was in Spain. I was in Madrid at the time, and I was listening to it as an audiobook as I was kind of walking around Madrid. The weather was beautiful. I would sit in the park in Madrid and listen to this book. I'd go to really nice restaurants and like listen to this book while I'm there. By the way, I am a solo traveler and I tend to take my trips alone. Audiobooks are a really great way for me to get that sense of companionship, and just like enjoy the city. So that's definitely my answer to the best book I've read so far. The best sequel I've read so far in 2021. I don't tend to read series very often. I have a hard time committing to a full-on series, especially if it's very long. With that said, I know that I definitely read the Ice Planet Barbarian series. Not the entire thing, but I'm not going to count that at all because that's just like smut in my mind, and that's like a fun time. It's definitely a real book. There's no doubt about that. But it was just like a fun time for me to read, and it was something I read to be kind of playful, I guess. It was just for entertainment. So my answer to this question is actually a companion series, and that is going to be Act Your Age, Eve Brown. Yes, I know the Brown Sisters trilogy is very, very overhyped, and can you tell I get so much of my reviews and recommendations from BookTube, but I absolutely loved this book. Again, I saw myself in Eve in so many ways. She is in her 20s, late 20s. She's struggling with kind of just finding her sense of place in terms of what she wants to do and what success means to her and what she wants her career to look like, and her family essentially views her as this like irresponsible fuck up, and they say, Eve, you really need to like get your life together. So they cut her off from her like, what do you call that? I don't know. I'm not rich. She has money she gets from her parents. So they cut her off from that, and she finds this job at this B&B. And of course, you know, I would love all the vibes. Cozy, English countryside, cottage, hot dude who's really good in bed, and a girl who's trying to just figure her life out and figure herself out. And I really, really love that book. That was my favorite in the Brown Sisters trilogy. Although I will tell you, I never actually read Get a Life, Chloe Brown. It is on my agenda. A new release you haven't read yet, but you want to. I don't keep track of things like release dates. I don't care that much. I'm not the kind of person that's like, oh my God, this book is coming out and I'm so excited to see it. So I don't know if I have any new releases that I'm really excited to read. So I'm just going to leave that question as I don't know. I don't care. I don't tend to look at dates. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year. My answer is the same. I don't pay attention to what is coming out, what's new, what are the release dates. I don't read series very often, so that's not something I tend to pay attention to, and therefore I don't care about new releases, and that's just that. So the next question is, what is your biggest disappointment? And I have such an easy answer to that. It is Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. I hated this book. Like, I really, really hated it. Let me start by saying I am a plus-size woman, and I wanted to read more plus-size books that featured plus-size characters. What am I saying? Anyway, I wanted to read more like that, and I thought this was often hailed as like really positive fat representation. Girl, where? Because I get that the author was like, oh, this character is really confident. She doesn't have any shame about her body. But is the bare minimum of positive fat representation, that she doesn't hate herself, because I was not buying it at all. Every conflict in the book around the character herself centered around her weight. That's not even me joking. Everything. And these characters were also very two-dimensional. They didn't have any personalities at all. Our main girl, her personality, as I read the book, was that she was fat and she liked rocks and she liked fiction. And we didn't get to see anything else aside from that. And what really bothered me, as I mentioned, was that all of the conflict and all of her insecurities were around her weight, which is not to say that you can't be confident and plus size and also have insecurities about your body, because we all have bad body days. We all have days where we feel not our best, and what we can practice is body neutrality. But those are not our only insecurities, especially for me as like a plus sized woman. My insecurities don't often center around my weight, and I just hated this book so much. I'm not gonna keep talking about it. It was plotless, it was pointless, I didn't believe the chemistry, it read like really, really, really bad fan fiction, and I did not see positive fat representation in that at all. The biggest surprise, I'm going to say, was Ice Planet Barbarians. I read this kind of like a joke, right? I saw that it was hyped up on TikTok, and I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to read Ice Planet Barbarians, like whatever. I love smut, I love romantic books, and why not? Let's just have a laugh, because it's going to be funny, right? Like, these people get kidnapped, and they get like stranded on an ice planet, and one girl has to save everyone, and she encounters this big, giant, massive, blue, apparently sexy alien guy who's like, you're my mate, but they don't speak the same language. I will tell you, trigger warnings for sexual assault and dubious consent at times. There is a scene where I'm like, that's not okay, girl's asleep. But anyway, it was a big surprise because I actually really enjoyed this book, and it was just something that was a good time to read. It was pretty well written. I think I gave it like 5 stars. It's exactly what I thought it was going to be in the best way possible. So I really liked that. And that was by Ruby Dixon. I don't know if I said. And then favorite new author, debut, or new to you. My favorite new author, I think I'm going to say, is Sean Ashcroft. I read a lot of Jack Harben. Really love his work. I think it's him. I really love Jack's work. It was really interesting. I read so many of his books, but Sean Ashcroft's books I just really, really loved. They're so sweet, and they're simple, and they're short, and I believe Sean is also identifies as part of the LGBTQ plus community. Why are words so hard today? And a lot of it is like own voices, and I really, really enjoy their stories. I think they're fun to read. Newest fictional crush, I have 2. One is Irdu, I think is his name, from Demon Lover. That's a book I really, really loved. There are things I question. The whole slavery background thing is questionable to me, but I think it wasn't handled the worst, just questionable. I still really enjoyed the story, and Irdu is a succubus who essentially feeds off of sexual energy, and he always acquires consent from his victims, quote unquote. Really, he's just feeding off of their orgasms and their sexual energy, and he does this when they're asleep, but again, he always has to ask for their permission. They have to agree to be in this sexual partnership. And one day, someone wakes up and she sees him in his bed, and instead of being like, oh my fucking god, there's a demon in my bed, she's like, yeah, okay. And this is a story of their love, and Irdu is just a sweetheart, and I loved him, and he is a definition of why I like men written by women. So I really loved him. My second fictional crush is Evelyn Hugo. Of course, it's Evelyn Hugo. Evelyn is my type. Like, girl, I grew up watching Kim Possible, and I was like, she go. So, of course, Evelyn Hugo was definitely someone that I loved. A new favorite character. All the characters kind of blur together for me. Do I have someone that's a new favorite? I do. Okay. I haven't finished this book yet, so maybe it's cheating, but I am currently reading A Dowry of Blood, which is Dracula and his brides. And and it's a polyamorous relationship. Dracula and everyone's kind of like bisexual or pansexual. They take on multiple partners, multiple lovers, and Dracula is abusive in this one. And we learn about their relationship and from Constanta's point of view, or Constanta. And my favorite character is Constanta because she is absolutely amazing. She is a badass in so many ways, and I just really love her, and I love being in her head and just hearing about her world. So that is my new favorite character. A book that made you cry. I don't cry at books very often. I don't know. I also tend to avoid sad books because I don't like to cry. But I would say a book that made me cry is going to have to be The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I actually didn't know this was a sad book, so I wanted to go in kind of blind. But it did make me cry. I have a video clip on my phone of me in my hotel room in Madrid the day before I go back to the US, just like sobbing because of the ending. So there we go. A book that made you happy. This is really interesting. I'm going to say that it was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. And the reason why it made me happy is it just made me feel like I was watching Pretty Little Liars and I was 19 years old again. I don't often see this book compared to Pretty Little Liars, but there are references to it in the book, very subtle ones. Like at one point the character's like, what, was it the evil twin? And it just reminded me of watching that show, and for that reason it's a book that made me happy. It's also just a very fast-paced, interesting book. It made me laugh at certain points. It's definitely a very heavy book at times in terms of the subjects that they cover, but it was just a book that made me happy because it sparked that like enjoyment of reading again. It got me to that point of like how fun it is to find a book that's so fast-paced and so entertaining, and you're just immersed fully in that world, in that story with those characters. So that is a book that made me happy. Even now I'm smiling. It's not a happy book necessarily. It's about a girl who was murdered and her boyfriend was blamed for it. He committed suicide, and he left like a confession saying that he did it. He did not do it, or at least our main character believes that he did not do it, and she tries to prove that in her kind of senior project. So that's a book that made me happy. The most beautiful book I have bought so far this year or received. That's a hard question to answer, but I'm going to say it is Amari and the Night Brothers. I did quite a bit of traveling over the summer, not anything too extensive, but I did a little bit. And in August, I was in London. I mentioned that in a previous video, and I picked up Amari and the Night Brothers. I just think that's an absolutely stunning cover. It looks magical. It feels whimsical. There's a lot of power in that cover as well, and it has blue sprayed edges. So that is the most beautiful book I have bought this year. And what books do I need to read by the end of the year? Now here's the thing. I am a mood reader. I have a very long TBR, but I never put pressure on myself to read a book, to finish a book, that I have to complete this book. I have to read this book by a certain time. That's not my style of reading. With that said, I know that there are books that I definitely want to read this year and would ideally like to finish by the end of the year. But again, I'm not putting that kind of pressure on myself. I would say number one is A Song of Achilles. I've had that for a really long time. Well, a few months, and I really want to read it. Like I said, though, I tend to avoid sad books. I know this book is really sad, but I also love Greek mythology. I love the myth of Achilles, so I'm very excited to read Achilles' story. So that's something I definitely have to read before the end of the year. The other book I know that I really want to read before the end of the year, or finish before the end of the year, is Raybearer. I'm reading that right now. I'm really enjoying it. I'm just in a bit of a reading slump, so it's taking me a little bit longer to finish. But that's a book that I know I definitely want to read by the end of the year. Also, if my voice is like fading out a little bit, it's because I'm looking at my bookshelf to see what else is on my shelf that I really want to read. I think the last book that I know I want to read this year is going to be Project Hail Mary. I just heard really great things about it, and I have the audiobook for it. It's something that I want to finish this year as well. So that's the end of the book Mid Year Book Freakout tag. Again, talking is very hard today for some reason. So we're coming to the end of this video as well. There's a few things that are left. So I figured for the rest of the video, let's stay on the bookish theme and talk about some things that I am doing for the Magical Readathon. Again, I did a Create-a-Sim video for this where I created my avatar for the Magical Readathon, my character, and I just want to talk about some things that I am reading for it. I told you that I'm reading Raybearer for the whole, read a book with a map challenge. I am counting A Dowry of Blood as part of that challenge. It is a horror book, but one of the things is read something that's haunted or about ghosts or has some kind of supernatural element. A Dowry of Blood is a book about vampires, so I think that definitely counts. And I just want to talk about some of my favorites for the year, because these videos always tend to be titled something like the best and worst years of the worst books of the year. I'm really struggling to talk right now. I have been talking for 20 minutes, just to be fair to myself. So that tends to be the title, but then you don't hear a lot about it. Like, I answer to give you a couple of books, and I want to go further into it. But at the end of the year, I will definitely do my top books of the year. But let's just go through it. I loved An Enchantment of Ravens, and I loved, what's the other book called by the same author? Sorcery of Thorns. I know people tend to like one book or the other, and usually not both. I loved both so much. They're both out my street. I love Margaret Rogerson's writing, and it was just a fun time. The Rise of Kyoshi was also chef kiss. Just beautiful. It felt like I was watching a new series of the Avatar world. Kyoshi was captured beautifully. I loved her story, and it is sapphic in nature, so I absolutely love that. Of course, I loved Red, White, and Royal Blue. You know I did. I'm not going to go over that. I also really loved Meet Cute Club by Jack Harbin, mostly for sentimental reasons. I have in this little note to myself. I have a reading journal, and I keep track of everything that I read. But it was just a really cute story, and it hit the thing that I was looking for it to hit, which is just soft, cozy bookstore kind of vibes. So I really love that. I loved Autobiography by Christina Lauren. It is about this bisexual boy. I believe he is bisexual. He moves down to Utah. It's very Mormon, very conservative, and he falls in love with a Mormon. And I believe, what do they call the heads of their communities? I'm sorry, that's my own ignorance speaking. His son is their story, and about sexuality and exploration, and just, it was really, really fun. I already told you the 7 Habits of Evelyn and Hugo. I already told you After H.E. Brown. You already know that I love them. A few others that I really, really loved was Wish You All the Best, and that was by Mason Deaver, who is non-binary. So I believe this is Own Voices, and we follow Ben, who gets kicked out of their home when they come out as non-binary. Their parents are very not accepting, and Ben has to move in with their sister. And we explore Ben's journey to discovering and accepting and understanding what it means for them to be non-binary and for them to be Ben. So I really, really love that. I also really loved A House at the Bottom of the Lake. That's a short story. It's kind of weird. It's definitely bizarre. I loved it in the moment, and then the more time that passes, the more I find myself thinking of this story. So that was definitely a favorite. And there's one that I'm forgetting. It's definitely sapphic in nature. I don't remember the name of it, though. Essentially, it's like this girl who's a pageant queen, and then she falls in love with this athlete who has to transfer schools because of homophobia when she comes out as a lesbian. And it's about her journey, and her journey of kind of understanding what it means to be open and out, and having people accept that or not accept that, and her just falling in love with this character who is very much in the closet because of her very homophobic mother. And it is just a really, really good book. I already told you least favorite was Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade for all the reasons I have said previously. Least favorite book as well was Night of the Mannequins. I read that a little bit after I read House at the Bottom of the Lake. Some people tend to really love both. I really did not like Night of the Mannequins. The writing was very confusing. The storyline was really confusing. I didn't understand what was happening at all. It was very hard to follow along with, but it was also a novella, which means that it didn't get the time that it needed to develop the plot. So that's another really disappointing book. Any other book that was disappointing, I don't remember because I probably just wiped it out of my memory. I put it in my notebook. I put it in my reading log. So that was that. So with that said, we are coming to the end of the video. I realized that this family actually have pets. So I put in some pet stuff all over the house, just because they would have that kind of stuff. And you can see how I decorated it, right? It has that sense of it's outdated. Not everything is updated, which is how they were able to afford it. But as always, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Bye, everyone.